you are already settling. Already, something in you knows that the next few hours belong entirely to rest, that wherever your thoughts have been today, whatever weight they carried, none of it is required here. You can set it down now, gently, the way you might set down a bag you have been carrying for a long time without noticing. Just let it rest on the floor beside you. It will still be there if you want it later, but for now, you are going somewhere else entirely. Find a comfortable position. Let your body sink a little more into whatever is holding you. Feel the weight of your limbs, the warmth gathering under blankets, the soft pressure of a pillow against the side of your face. Notice your breathing, not to change it, just to notice it, the slow rise, the slow fall. In a moment, you will begin to go somewhere very quiet, very still, very far below the surface of the ordinary world. And as you travel there, you may find your eyes growing heavy, your thoughts becoming softer and less distinct, your breath evening out into something long and slow and easy. That is exactly right. That is exactly what is supposed to happen. The place you are going is deep, deeper than weather, deeper than light, deeper than the reach of any noise the waking world makes. It is a place where the only rule is that nothing is rushed, because the deep does not permit hurry. And tonight neither do you, so breathe in slowly and let the breath go slowly and follow it down, 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 into the dark and the quiet and the warmth, into the cartography well, where the silk lines descend and the data comes back soft and the night lasts as long as it needs to. You are already inside. You know this without having to think about it, the way you know a familiar room in the dark, not by seeing it, but by the feel of the air, the particular quality of the silence, the small sounds that arrive in a sequence you recognize. The station hums, not loudly, not insistently. It hums the way a very large, very old thing hums when it is working precisely as it was designed to work, a low, subsonic resonance that you feel more in your sternum than you hear with your ears, the geological pressure of miles of ocean pressing evenly against curved steel walls from every direction at once. You have been down here long enough that you no longer notice the hum when you are busy. You only notice it now, in this moment, because you have paused, because you have let yourself be still for a moment before beginning, and in that stillness, the hum is almost beautiful. The station is called the Cartography Well, and it sits like a seed pearl inside the body of the deep, anchored to a shelf of basalt by 3 tethering cables as thick as your arm, suspended just above the floor of a region the surface charts call Sector Orvaine. The charts are sparse here, the lines thin out, the depth markings grow approximate, and then there is simply a blank, a pale, empty rectangle at the center of the page with a single notation in small, careful lettering, floor not reached. That notation is why you are here. That blank is your work. The station is small, smaller than most people imagine when you try to describe it. A central corridor, low-ceilinged and curved, with 3 chambers branching off it. The equipment bay where the silk lines are wound and stored. The living space where your bunk sits behind a folding curtain. And the survey room where you are standing now. The survey room is the heart of the station. It is barely larger than a comfortable sitting room on the surface, but every surface has been made to serve. Banks of monitors line the curved inner wall, most of them dim to amber standby now, their soft, warm glow laying long shadows across the steel. There is a narrow work desk bolted to the floor, and on it, your log, open to a fresh page, your depth logging stylus, uncapped, resting in the groove at the top of the page, a ceramic cup of kelp broth, still steaming slightly, placed just to the right of the log where your hand can find it without looking. And at the center of the room, mounted on its gimbaled frame so that it always hangs perfectly level regardless of any subtle shift in the station's tethering, the reel. And the reel is perhaps the thing you love most about this work, though you have never tried to explain that to anyone on the surface, because it is difficult to explain why a large mechanical spool of wet silk line might inspire anything resembling love. But here, in the amber-lit quiet of the survey room, with the geological hum moving through the floor and the absolute dark of Sector Orvaine pressing gently at the porthole glass, you understand it perfectly. The reel is a question. Every lowering is a question sent down into a place that has never been asked before, and the data that comes back, the temperature gradients, the pressure readings, the faint bioluminescent signatures logged by the sensor array woven into the silk itself, that data is the deep's slow, considered answer. You pull on your survey gloves, thin enough to feel through, treated to resist the cold and the wet, and you run a hand along the first few meters of line where it emerges from the reel and hangs free over the lowering shaft. The silk is cool, slightly damp from the last survey, though it has been drying for hours. You can feel the faint texture of the woven sensor filaments inside it, the tiny irregularities that make the line feel more alive than a simple cord of fiber. You check the sensor array readout on the nearest monitor. Green, green, green. A row of small lights indicating that every node along the first 1,000 meters of line is active and logging. You note this in your log with a soft click of the stylus on paper. Outside the porthole, the dark is total, or nearly total. Because even here, even in this unmapped canyon at the edge of the continental shelf's reach, the dark is not entirely empty. As you watch, as you let your eyes rest against the porthole glass, your breath making a small ghost on the cold surface, you see it. A ribbon, a slow drift of blue-green light moving from left to right across the field of the porthole, perhaps 10 meters out, perhaps 20. Distance is difficult to judge in the deep with no reference points. It is a colony of bioluminescent microorganisms moving together in a long, loose band, and they pulse as they move, a slow, irregular brightening and dimming, like a very long exhalation made visible. You watch until the ribbon passes out of view. You note its bearing and approximate density in the log. Click of the stylus. Then you settle your hands back on the reel. The first lowering of the night is about to begin. You release the reel's locking mechanism, a soft, precise click, different from the stylus, lower and more final, and the silk line begins to descend. You control the rate with your gloved hands, feeling the line run through your fingers with a cool, steady drag. This is the part that no instrument can quite capture, the feel of it, the way the line carries information back to your hands before the sensors have finished logging it. A slight increase in resistance means denser water, a thermal layer, something changing in the column below. A brief lessening of drag might mean a current running perpendicular to the descent, nudging the weighted end sideways through the dark. You have done this enough times that your hands have learned a kind of listening. They read the line the way a careful reader reads a page, not rushing to the end, but pausing at each sentence, feeling the weight of it. The depth counter on the monitor beside you ticks upward in smooth increments. 100 meters. You pause the reel with a gentle squeeze of your gloved hand, a practiced motion, barely conscious, and check the sensor readout. Temperature at 100 meters, 3.4 degrees. You write this in the log. The stylus makes its soft click against the paper, a sound so quiet it would be inaudible in any other environment, but here, with the hum of geological pressure as your only background, it is perfectly clear. A small sound, a recording of something real. You find this satisfying in a way that is hard to articulate. The way a small, precise action can feel like an act of care, you release the line again and let it run. The amber glow of the standby monitors moves across the curved wall as your eyes track the depth counter. The survey room smells of recycled station air, mineral, slightly cool, with the faint underlayer of salt that never entirely goes away, no matter how long the filtration system has been running. It is not an unpleasant smell. After enough time down here, it becomes simply the smell of work, the smell of the particular quiet that belongs to this place and no other. You lift the ceramic cup with your free hand and hold it in both palms for a moment before drinking, feeling the warmth spread through your fingers, the slight weight of it, the faint curl of steam rising. The kelp broth is mild, savory in a way that sits at the back of the throat, and warm all the way down. You set the cup back in its place and return your attention to the line, 200 meters, temperature 2.9 degrees. You note it. Click. The line runs on. There is a quality to time down here that is unlike time on the surface. On the surface, time is organized by light, by the way the sky changes, by the angle of shadows, by the dozen small cues that tell you where you are in the arc of a day. Down here, none of those cues exist. The station runs on a 28-hour cycle, timed to the rhythm of deep tidal pressure rather than the rotation of the Earth, and within that cycle, the hours are marked not by brightness or darkness, the dark outside is constant, but by the slow accumulation of data in the log, the gradual deepening of the survey line, the small rituals that structure the shift. A cup of broth, a line lowered, a measurement taken, a number written down, another cup of broth, another 100 meters. In this way, time becomes something more like depth, not a river moving past you, but a column descending below you, each moment a new layer, each layer resting quietly on the one before. 300 meters, 2.7 degrees, click. You shift your weight slightly on the stool, a low padded stool bolted to the floor beside the reel, worn smooth from years of use before you arrived, and you have added your own small impression to it in the time since. The small of your back is comfortable, your shoulders are loose. Through the hull, beneath the amber light and the mineral air and the soft click of the stylus, the geological hum continues, patient, enormous, indifferent, and somehow deeply reassuring. It is the sound of the planet breathing. It has been making this sound for longer than there have been ears to hear it, and it will go on making it long after. In the context of that sound, your own small worries, whatever they were, wherever they live, seem very far away, very small, not unimportant perhaps, but distant, like objects seen through the wrong end of a telescope. You let them be distant. 400 meters, 2.6 degrees, click. The depth counter continues its patient upward roll, and you let the line run, and outside the porthole the dark holds its stillness and the station hums. After a while, after the line has descended through the first 1,000 meters and you have logged each 100-meter temperature and the sensor array has returned its quiet rows of green lights, you lock the reel and stand and stretch unhurried the way you do at the end of each first interval. Your arms rise above your head, your spine lengthens. There is a small sound from somewhere in your upper back, a soft, comfortable release, and then you lower your arms and roll your shoulders once, twice, and the survey room settles back into its familiar proportions around you. You move to the hydrophone station at the far end of the room. It is a modest setup, a receiver panel, a pair of soft headphones hanging on a hook, a small monitor showing the current frequency sweep as a slow, scrolling line of pale light on a dark background. You lift the headphones and settle them over your ears, and for a moment there is only the white interior silence of good insulation, and then gradually the sound of the ocean resolves around you. It is not what people on the surface imagine when they think of the ocean's sound. It is not roaring, not crashing. At this depth, the ocean sounds like the interior of something vast and breathing, a low, complex murmur that contains within it a dozen quieter sounds layered on top of one another, each at a slightly different frequency, each arriving from a slightly different direction. There is the geological tone, deeper than anything the human ear is designed to hear comfortably, felt more than heard, a vibration at the very lowest threshold of perception. Above it, the faint structural sounds of the station itself, the hydraulic sigh of the pressure equalization valves as they make their small, constant adjustments, the occasional soft tick of metal contracting against the cold. And above that, fainter still, arriving from somewhere far above and to the north, a cetacean tone. You adjust the receiver dial with one careful finger, tuning toward it. It grows slightly clearer, not loud, never loud, but present. A long, slow call, descending in pitch over several seconds before fading into the background murmur. Then silence. Then, after a long pause, the call again, slightly different this time, as though the creature is answering itself, or listening for an answer that has not yet come. You stand with the headphones on and listen for several minutes, not logging, not analyzing, just listening. The call comes 3 more times, each slightly fainter than the last, moving away toward the north, and then it is gone, absorbed back into the layered murmur of the deep, and you are left with the geological tone and the hydraulic sigh and the quiet of the station. You hang the headphones back on their hook. You stand for a moment with your hand resting on the receiver panel, feeling the faint vibration of it through your palm. The hydrophone is always sensing, always listening, even when you are not. There is something comforting about that. The sense that the station is paying attention even when you are not, that the instruments are keeping their own kind of vigil, their own patient watch. You return to the real. You refill your ceramic cup from the small insulated carafe on the shelf beside the desk. The kelp broth is still warm, steaming gently as you pour it, and you carry the cup back to your stool and sit and hold it in both hands for a moment before unlocking the reel for the second interval. The warmth of the cup against your palms, the mineral salt smell of the air, the amber glow on the curved walls, the hum in your sternum. These things are here, and you are here, and the line is ready to descend, and the deep is patient. You release the lock. The silk runs cool through your gloved fingers, and the second interval begins. The second interval takes the line through depths that the first interval only gestured toward, the upper reaches of Sector Orvaine's canyon walls, where the geological survey data suggests narrow shelves of basalt jutting out from the rock face at irregular intervals, too small and too unpredictable to map precisely from the surface, but cataloged in the sensor returns as brief anomalies in the pressure readings. You feel one of these now, a slight, brief resistance in the line as though it has grazed something, followed by a gentle sideways drift that tells you the weighted end has been nudged a few degrees off vertical by the shelf's presence. You note this in the log. Click. You feed a little more line and feel the drift correct itself as the weight clears the shelf and continues its descent into open water below. The line settles back to its familiar straight pull, and you breathe out slowly. 1,100 meters, 2.3 degrees, click, 1,200 meters, 2.2 degrees, click. The monitor beside you shows the sensor array returns in pale green curves, temperature, pressure, conductivity, and in a separate column the bioluminescent signature readings, which at this depth are faint but present, a scatter of small, irregular pulses, logged as the array passes through the water column. You glance at the bioluminescent data and note a slight increase in pulse frequency between 1100 and 1200 meters, a layer of something not dense enough to be visible through the porthole, but detectable by the sensors. A thin biological layer, perhaps a colony of small creatures gathered at a particular thermal boundary, feeding or resting or simply drifting in the way that things at this depth drift, without urgency, without destination, carried by currents too slow and too enormous to feel as movement. You sketch the curve in the margin of your log, a gentle shallow arc indicating the layer's position in the depth column, with a small notation beside it, BL2, sparse, passive. The drawing takes only a moment, and it is not precise. You are not an artist, but it is yours, and it will be here on this page when you open the log tomorrow, a small record that this layer existed, that it was here at this depth in this sector on this particular shift of the 28-hour cycle. Something about that feels important, though you could not easily say why. 1,300 meters, 2.1 degrees, click, you lift your cup and drink. The broth is slightly cooler now, but still warm enough to comfort. You can feel it tracing a path down through your chest, a small interior warmth settling somewhere behind your sternum alongside the geological hum. You set the cup down and rest your free hand on your knee and watch the depth counter and let the line run and breathe. Outside the porthole, the dark is the same dark it always is. Absolute, patient, neither threatening nor inviting, simply present. But as you watch, as you let your gaze soften and rest against the glass, something changes at the edge of the porthole's field. A faint suggestion of light, not the ribboned blue-green of the microorganism colonies you saw earlier, but something different, something deeper in color, closer to violet, pulsing in a slower rhythm. It is far enough away that you cannot make out a shape, just the light itself, appearing and disappearing with a regularity that suggests something alive and deliberate, something sending a signal or simply existing in its own luminous way, unaware of you and your porthole and your amber-lit station. You press your palm flat against the porthole glass. The glass is cold, genuinely cold, even through your glove, the cold of the deep conducting through several centimeters of reinforced material to meet your hand. The violet light pulses once more, a long, slow brightening, then a slow fade, and then it is gone, moved deeper into the canyon, or simply beyond the porthole's narrow field of view. You stay with your hand on the glass for a moment after it has gone, feeling the cold, watching the dark. Then you return to the log. Click. 1,400 meters, 2.0 degrees exactly. You note the round number with a small private satisfaction. There is something pleasing about an exact number in a field of approximations, a clean value among the gradients and fractional degrees. You circle it lightly with the tip of the stylus, not pressing hard enough to mark the paper, just a gesture, a quiet acknowledgement. The line runs on. At 1,500 meters, the reel makes a sound it does not always make, a very faint, barely audible vibration in the frame, like a single note played on an instrument with a very long resonance. You pause the descent and check the gimbaled frame. It is level, as it always is, hanging perfectly plumb in its housing. You check the sensor array readout, all green. You check the tension gauge on the reel, within normal parameters. The sound does not repeat. It was perhaps nothing, a small harmonic set off by some interaction between the line's tension and the geological hum passing through the frame. You note it anyway, briefly, in the margin. Frame resonance, 1,500 meters, brief, not repeated. This is what the log is for. Not only the clean data, the temperatures and pressures and bioluminescent signatures, but the marginal notes, the small observations that may mean nothing or may, one day, mean something to someone who reads this log and recognizes a pattern. You release the reel and let the line continue. 1600 meters, 1.9 degrees, click. The second interval ends at 2000 meters, where the sensor array reaches the limit of its reliable resolution and the data begins to soften at the edges, not wrong exactly, but less precise, the readings carrying a wider margin of uncertainty that the log's notation system records as a small bracket around each value. You lock the reel at 2000 meters and sit for a moment with your hands in your lap, feeling the cool dampness of the silk on your gloves, looking at the page of the log that the second interval has filled. Rows of numbers, small sketched curves in the margins, the notation about the frame resonance, the circled round number at 1400 meters, the bioluminescent layer sketched as a gentle arc. It is not dramatic data. It is not the kind of data that will make anyone on the surface catch their breath when they read the transmission. But it is true data, careful, patient, honestly recorded, and it describes a column of water that has never been described before, a depth of ocean that has never been measured until tonight, and that feels, in its quiet way, like enough. You stand and stretch again. You take your ceramic cup to the small galley alcove at the end of the corridor, 2 steps from the survey room, a narrow space with a heating element and a shelf of provisions, and you rinse the cup under the small trickle of the station's water recycler and refill it, this time adding a small pinch of dried mineral salt from the container on the shelf, the way you have learned to prepare it when the shift is long and your body needs the mineral balance. The broth steams. The galley alcove is warmer than the survey room. The heating element radiates a gentle, dry warmth that is different from the warmth of the cup, more ambient, settling over your shoulders like something laid there by a careful hand. You stand in the galley alcove for a moment longer than you need to, not for any reason, just because it is warm and the warmth is pleasant, and there is no reason to hurry back. The station breathes around you. The pressure equalization valves sigh, that soft hydraulic exhalation, evenly spaced, like the station itself is practicing the kind of breathing you were invited to practice when you first arrived here tonight, the slow and even breathing of something at rest. You carry your cup back to the survey room. You sit, you hold the cup in both hands, and the third interval begins. The third interval is the one you have been moving toward all shift, the deep interval, the one that takes the line past the previous record depth for Sector Orvaine and into the uncharted column below. The previous record was set on the last shift, 2,412 meters. Below that, the log has a single notation at the bottom of the depth column, written there as a kind of placeholder, a promise to the next interval. Below here, unmeasured. You release the reel. The silk runs cool and steady through your fingers. You have let out nearly 2,000 meters of line already during tonight's earlier intervals, and the reel is noticeably lighter now. You can feel the difference in the resistance, the slightly faster tendency of the spool to run if you ease your grip. You keep your grip steady and even. You are not rushing toward the record depth. You are simply descending, measurement by measurement, the way the deep requires. 2,100 meters, 1.8 degrees, click. 2,200 meters, 1.7 degrees, click. The amber monitors glow. The geological hum moves through the floor, through the stool, through the base of your spine in a frequency too low to name but entirely familiar. Outside the porthole, the dark holds. No bioluminescence at this depth for the past several hundred meters. You are below the layer you sketched earlier, below whatever thin biological boundary gathered those small creatures in their drifting colony. The water here, if the sensor data can be trusted, and you trust it, you have learned to trust it, is very still. Not still the way a pond is still on a windless morning, but still in a more fundamental way, a stillness that is the absence of any mechanism for disturbance, no surface, no weather, no current strong enough to register, just the water and the rock walls of the canyon on either side of the descending line, and the absolute dark. 2,300 meters, 1.6 degrees, click, you drink from your cup, the warmth is steady in your hands. 2,400 meters, 1.5 degrees, click, you are approaching the record, you are not excited, excitement is the wrong word for what this is. It is more like the feeling of completing a long and patient task, of reaching the end of something that required care and unhurry to reach, a quiet satisfaction held loosely. 2,412 meters. You pause the reel, you look at the depth counter for a moment. 1.5 degrees, the same as the last measurement, the gradient flattening here, the temperature stabilizing as though the water has found its level. You make a small mark in the log beside this entry, not a circle, not a notation, just a small horizontal line, a quiet acknowledgement that this is the place, and then you release the reel and let the line continue past it, into the unmeasured depth below. The line runs 2,500 meters, 1.4 degrees, click, below the record now, below the previous limit of the log. You are writing new lines on a page that was blank before tonight, and the data comes back quiet and unremarkable and entirely new. Each temperature, each pressure reading, each faint bioluminescent signature, a number that has never existed in a log before, a measurement of something that has never been measured. 2,600 meters, 1.4 degrees, the gradient has truly flattened here, the temperature holding steady at the same value for the second measurement in a row. You note this in the log. Click. The sensor array at 2,600 meters returns something you have to look at twice. Not an anomaly, nothing alarming, nothing outside the parameters of what is possible or expected, but the bioluminescent signature reading is slightly elevated compared to the readings from the previous 100 meters, not dramatically elevated, a gentle increase, the kind that the surface team would classify as trace biological activity and move past without particular comment. But you have been doing this long enough to trust the small elevations, the gentle increases. Something is here, or was here recently, or will be here. Something biological, something that makes light, something alive in the particular way that things at the bottom of unmapped canyons are alive, slowly, patiently, without reference to anything outside themselves. You watch the porthole. The dark holds, and then there, not a ribbon this time, not a pulse, something more diffuse, a very faint, very even suffusion of blue-green at the lower edge of the porthole's field, as though the floor of the canyon still far below is generating a gentle ambient glow. It is too faint to be certain of. You cannot tell whether it is real or whether your eyes, resting against the dark for so long, are beginning to find light where there is none. But the sensor data supports it. The slight elevation in bioluminescent signature is consistent with a diffuse biological layer at or near the canyon floor, something spread across the rock in a thin, even carpet of living light. You press your palm to the porthole glass, cold, steady. The faint blue-green at the lower edge of the field is still there, still diffuse, still uncertain, but present. You watch it for a long time, your hand flat against the glass, your breath making its small ghost on the cold surface. Then you return to the reel. You note the observation in the log with careful language. Possible diffuse bioluminescent layer, lower porthole field, consistent with sensor elevation at 2600 meters, uncertain, recommend correlation with next interval. And you make a small sketch in the margin, the porthole as a circle, the faint glow as a wash of loose parallel lines along its lower edge, the depth notation beside it. The sketch takes a moment. The stylus moves slowly, thoughtfully. The log fills, line by line, with the record of tonight's descent. 2,700 meters, 1.4 degrees, click, 2,800 meters, 1.3 degrees, a slight drop, the gradient returning after its flat interval, the temperature beginning to decrease again as the line approaches whatever the floor of Sector Orvaine might be, wherever that floor finally rests in the dark below. The geological hum shifts almost imperceptibly at this depth. You feel it in the soles of your feet through the floor of the station, a very slight change in frequency, as though the rock beneath you is registering the line's approach in its own deep, slow way. You know this is not possible. You know the line is far too small, the station far too small, to be sensed by the rock, but the feeling persists, and you do not dismiss it, because one of the things you have learned down here is that some feelings are real even when their literal interpretation is not. The rock is not sensing the line, but the rock is doing something, shifting slightly in the pattern of its geological breathing, responding to pressures and temperatures and forces entirely unrelated to you and your survey, and you are feeling that shift through the floor of the station, and the coincidence of timing gives it the texture of a response. You let it feel like a response. There is no harm in that. 2,900 meters, 1.3 degrees, click, 3,000 meters, 1.2 degrees, click. You stop here for a moment, not because the data requires it, but because 3,000 meters is a number with a kind of weight to it, a round number like the one you circled earlier, but heavier, more significant, 3,000 meters below the surface of the ocean, 3,000 meters below weather, below light, below the reach of any sound the surface world makes. You sit with the number for a moment. You hold your cup in both hands and feel the warmth and look at the depth counter and let the number settle into you the way the geological hum settles, not as information exactly, but as a kind of orientation, a reminder of where you are, how deep, how still, how far below everything that might trouble you. You let out a long, slow breath, and the line runs on. The third interval continues past 3,000 meters and into depths that no instrument attached to this station has ever reached. The sensor array returning its data with quiet diligence, green light steady, the log filling with careful numbers in your handwriting, each one a small act of attention paid to a place that has never received attention before. The temperature continues its gradual descent, 1.1 degrees at 3,100 meters, 1.0 at 3,200, the numbers approaching the lower end of the sensor array's optimal range, but still well within it, still reliable, still trustworthy. At 3,300 meters, something happens with the bioluminescent data. Not an alarm, nothing sudden, nothing to cause concern, but the signature readings, which have been hovering at a slight elevation since the 2,600 meter mark, increase more noticeably here, a step change rather than a gradient, as though the line has passed through some boundary layer and emerged into a region where the biological activity is simply more present. You check the sensor array, all green. You look at the porthole, and there it is. The diffuse blue-green glow that was uncertain before is uncertain no longer. It fills the lower third of the porthole now, not bright, never bright but unmistakable, a soft, even wash of cold living light rising from somewhere below the station, from the floor of the canyon that has never been reached and is now, it seems, not very far away. You sit with your hand on the reel and look at the light for a long time. It does not pulse the way the microorganism ribbons pulse. It does not blink or shift or change direction. It simply glows, steady and even and patient, the way something glows when it has been glowing for a very long time and has no particular reason to stop. You think of the blank on the surface chart, the notation in small, careful lettering, floor not reached, and you think that whoever wrote that notation could not have imagined this, could not have imagined that the floor, when it was finally approached, would announce itself with light. You note it in the log. You sketch it in the margin. The portholes circle again, but this time the wash of parallel lines fills the lower third, and you add a note. Floor approach, diffuse BL layer, steady, no pulse, no direction, approximate depth, TBD. Then you release the reel and let the line continue toward the light. 3,400 meters, 0.9 degrees, click. The glow in the porthole has deepened slightly, not brighter exactly, but more present, more resolved, the individual motes of it beginning to be distinguishable as the station descends toward the layer's source. They are not moving, or they are moving so slowly that movement is indistinguishable from stillness. Small points of cold blue-green light distributed evenly across the lower portion of the porthole's field, like a field of very distant stars seen through water. 3,500 meters, 0.8 degrees, click. The geological hum is slightly different here. You are sure of it now, not imagining it. Lower in frequency, with a longer resonant period, as though the rock of the canyon floor is thicker here, denser, transmitting the deep Earth's vibration through a greater mass. The station responds to it. The pressure equalization valves sigh a little more frequently, making their small hydraulic adjustments at slightly shorter intervals than usual, and the hull makes occasional soft sounds, not alarming sounds, familiar sounds, the sounds of metal settling into equilibrium with its environment. The station has been here before in terms of depth. The tethering cables allow a range of vertical positioning, but it has not been here in terms of this particular region, this particular canyon, this particular floor. Everything is slightly new, and the station, in its patient way, is adjusting. You rest your free hand on the hull beside the porthole, flat-palmed, feeling the slight vibration of it, the deep geological frequency moving through the metal into your hand. Cool, steady. The hull is doing what it was built to do, and it is doing it without complaint, and there is a great deal of comfort in that, in the competence of the station, its quiet reliability, its willingness to carry you this far into the dark and hold you here while you work. You lower your hand and return to the reel. 3,600 meters, 0.8 degrees, click. The bioluminescent layer is very close now. The porthole glow has resolved further, the individual motes of light clearly visible and clearly not moving, arranged with a regularity that suggests they are anchored to something, rooted to the floor rather than free-floating in the column. You note this in the log. BL sources appear stationary, possible benthic organisms, floor imminent. Click, 3,700 meters, 0.7 degrees, click, and then the line slows. Not because you have tightened your grip, not because of a shelf or a resistance in the water column. The line slows because the weighted end has found something below it, has touched, gently, without impact, the floor of Sector Orvaine. The silk goes slack for just a moment, the characteristic softening of tension that tells you the weight is resting, that there is no more depth to descend into, that the line has arrived at the bottom of the question. You hold the reel still, you look at the depth counter, 3,741 meters. You write it in the log. You write it slowly, in larger numerals than your usual notation, because this number deserves the space, because this is the number that fills the blank on the surface chart that replaces the notation "floor not reached" with a measurement, a real and honest measurement of a real and honest depth. 3,741 meters, the floor of Sector Orvaine, the bottom of the canyon that has never been reached. You sit with that for a moment. The porthole shows you the bioluminescent layer in its full resolution now, the station hovering just above it, close enough that the individual organisms are clearly distinguishable as small, irregular shapes, each one generating its own steady cold light, the whole population of them together producing the diffuse blue-green glow that has been visible for the past several hundred meters. They are very still, very quiet. They do not seem disturbed by the presence of the station above them, or by the silk line that has just come to rest among them. Or perhaps they are aware of these things and simply do not find them alarming. Things at this depth have developed a long patience, a long comfort with the dark and the pressure and the silence. They have no particular reason to be disturbed by one more thing resting among them on the floor of the canyon. You press your palm to the porthole glass one more time. Cold, the cold of the deep, constant and deep and entirely familiar now. The blue-green light plays through the glass and onto your glove in faint shifting patterns, not shifting because the organisms are moving, but shifting because the station itself is moving very slightly, swaying on its tethering cables in the infinitesimal currents of the canyon's lower water, and the light moves with it, the way the light in a very still room moves when you turn your head. You stay like this for a while. Hand on the glass, eyes on the light, the geological hum in your sternum, the mineral salt air in your lungs, the warmth of the empty cup somewhere behind you on the desk, the soft, regular sigh of the pressure equalization valves, the barely audible ping of the hydrophone receiver, registering something at the very edge of its range, perhaps another cetacean tone far above, or perhaps only the geological vibration of the canyon walls translating itself into a frequency the receiver recognizes. You listen to it. You do not need to log it. You do not need to do anything at all. For a moment, the line is at the bottom, the depth is recorded, the log is full of careful numbers and marginal sketches and small, precise notations. The work of the third interval is complete. You simply stand at the porthole and watch the light that has never been watched before, and breathe. After a while, after the porthole light has settled into something entirely familiar, entirely comfortable, as though you have been watching it for years rather than minutes, you begin the slow process of raising the line. This is the part of the survey that is easiest to underestimate. The raising requires the same care as the lowering, the same attention to tension and drift, and the information the line carries back through the silk to your gloved hands. The data logged on the ascent will mirror the descent data and allow you to check for drift in the sensor array, for any changes in the water column that develop during the interval between the two passes. You turn the reel slowly, hand over hand, and the wet silk coils back onto the spool with a soft, rhythmic sound. Not quite a sound, really, more a sensation, the slight vibration of the reel frame as the line settles into its loops, layer over layer. The depth counter descends, 3,700, 3,650, 3,600. The temperature data on the return pass mirrors the descent, 0.7, 0.8, 0.8, the gradient as steady as it was on the way down, the water column unchanged in the interval. You work steadily, unhurried, your hands moving in the rhythm they have practiced into something close to instinct, hand over hand, the silk running cool through your fingers, the reel turning, the depth counter descending, the amber monitors glow, the geological hum holds its frequency. Outside the porthole, the bioluminescent layer recedes as the station's position relative to the floor increases, the individual organisms blurring back into a diffuse glow, the glow softening, dimming, until by the time the depth counter reads 3,000 meters, it is only a faint suggestion at the very bottom edge of the porthole's field, a memory of light, a trace, and then it is gone. The porthole is dark again, the deep and patient dark that you have been watching all shift, that has been watching back in its own way, that will be here long after the station is gone and the cables are retrieved and the surveys are complete. You raise the last of the line and lock the reel and sit for a moment with your hands in your lap, feeling the coolness of the wet silk on your gloves, the slight ache in your arms from the long work of the raising. A good ache, the kind that means you have done something real. The fourth interval is a rest interval, not sleep, not yet, but the station's built-in period of reduced activity between the deep survey and the logging session, a deliberate pause written into the 28-hour cycle by whoever designed this protocol, who understood that the data needs time to settle before it is reviewed, and that the sounder needs time to settle too. You peel off your survey gloves and hang them on the hook beside the reel to dry. You roll your sleeves back down. You wash your hands at the small basin in the corridor, the water cold from the recycler, and dry them on the cloth hanging beside it. Then you go to the galley alcove and you make yourself a proper meal. The provisions on the shelf are simple. Everything down here is simple, chosen for ease of preparation and nutritional density, and the long shelf life required by a station that is resupplied only at the end of each deployment cycle. But simple does not mean without pleasure. You have learned down here to find the pleasure in simple things, in the careful preparation of a meal that takes more time than it strictly needs to, in the small choices available within a limited set of options, in the ritual of cooking when cooking is really only the combination of a few prepared components in a particular order. You take a sealed pouch of grain from the shelf and set it in the heating element's warm water bath to reconstitute, then take a small tin of pressed sea vegetables and open it carefully, the mineral smell of it rising immediately, sharp and briny, familiar, the smell of the ocean in concentrated form. You lay the sea vegetables out on the small folding surface beside the heating element, arranging them with a care that is not strictly necessary, but that makes the process feel considered, intentional. From another shelf, a small container of sesame paste, thick, slightly sweet, with a nutty depth that balances the brine of the sea vegetables. You spoon a small amount into the center of a ceramic bowl, the same kind of bowl as your broth cup, plain and pale and warm to hold. While the grain reconstitutes, you stand in the galley alcove and listen to the station. The pressure valves sigh. The geological hum continues its patient frequency. Somewhere in the equipment bay, the sensor array is completing its post-survey diagnostic cycle, and you can hear it, very faintly, as a soft, irregular series of tones, each one brief and quiet, the system checking itself against its own baseline values, confirming that everything is within range, everything is as it should be. Green, 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 all green. The grain is ready. You lift the pouch from the water bath with a folded cloth and open it carefully, steam rising, and pour the contents into the bowl over the sesame paste. You stir slowly, watching the paste dissolve into the grain, the color shifting from pale to warm gold as it incorporates. Then the sea vegetables, laid over the top, still cool from the tin, a contrast in temperature that is pleasant, the warm grain and the cool brine together in the same bowl. You carry the bowl back to the survey room. You sit at your desk, not on the survey stool, but in the second chair, the one that faces the porthole rather than the real, the one you sit in when the work is done and you are simply present in the room without any task. The bowl is warm in your lap, the amber monitors glow on the walls, the porthole shows it's dark. You eat slowly. Each spoonful is simple: grain, paste, sea vegetable, the combination of flavors that you have eaten many times down here and that has become, without your quite meaning it to, the taste of this work, the taste of deep surveys and amber monitors and silk lines and geological hums. You are not in a hurry, the rest interval is long and the bowl is small, and you have learned to eat the way you lower the line, measurement by measurement, attentive to each increment, unhurried. The sea vegetables have a slight crunch to them, a texture that requires a moment of attention, not effort, just presence. The sesame paste is warm now, loosened by the grain, coating each mouthful with something rich and slightly sweet. The grain itself is mild, slightly nutty, filling in the way that simple things are filling, not because they are elaborate, but because they are enough, exactly enough, nothing in excess and nothing missing. You finish the bowl and set it on the desk beside the closed log and lean back in the chair and let your eyes rest against the porthole. Dark. The porthole shows dark, but you know what is below it now. You know the exact depth of it. You have recorded it in careful numerals in the log. You have felt the floor of it through the silk line and your gloved hands. The blank on the surface chart is filled. The notation will be updated, and the floor of Sector Orvaine will continue to glow its quiet blue-green in the dark, whether anyone is watching or not, whether the log records it or not, whether there is a station above it or only the open water of the deep. That thought is a comfortable one. The idea that the light is there regardless, that it does not require observation to exist, that it has been glowing in the dark floor of this canyon for longer than anyone has been keeping records and will go on glowing. There is something restful about that, something that makes your own small role in the work feel both meaningful and appropriately modest. You were here, you looked, you recorded, and then the work continued without you, as it always does. After the meal, you move through the station's small end of interval routines with the unhurried ease of long practice. The ceramic bowl rinsed and set in the drying rack in the galley alcove, the survey gloves turned and hung to finish drying, the depth counter reset to 0 for the next shift's sounder, who will arrive, eventually in the station's own time, to continue the work. You make a fresh cup of kelp broth because the rest interval is not over yet, and the warmth of the cup is something you are not ready to give up. You carry it back to the survey room and sit in the porthole chair again, the bowl replaced by the cup, your hands wrapped around it in the familiar way. You open the log to review the night's entries. You read slowly from the beginning of the shift. The first temperature at 100 meters, 3.4 degrees. The bioluminescent ribbon noted in the early survey. The cetacean tone logged through the hydrophone. The layer at 1100 to 1200 meters, sketched in the margin as a gentle arc. The frame resonance at 1500 meters. The violet pulse beyond the porthole. The gradual deepening through the record depth. The careful notation of the crossing. The new measurements below it. The diffuse glow beginning to resolve as the line descended toward the floor. And finally, the number, 3,741 meters, written in larger numerals at the bottom of the depth column, the floor of Sector Orvaine, measured for the first time, recorded in this log, real. You close the log. You close it slowly, feeling the slight resistance of the cover as it meets the last page, the soft sound of it closing, the way the stack of filled pages feels slightly thicker than the blank pages remaining, the weight of the shift's work accumulated. You set the stylus in its groove. You leave the log on the desk where the next sounder will find it. where the surface team will eventually receive its transcription, where the blank on the chart will be given its number, you lift your cup. The broth is warm. The station hums. The monitors glow their amber. Outside the porthole, the dark is the same dark it has always been, and somewhere far below, in the floor of the canyon that has never been reached until tonight, the bioluminescent organisms pulse their quiet light, steady and even and patient, the way things glow when they have been glowing for a very long time and have no particular reason to stop. You drink the last of the broth. You set the cup down. And now the shift is over. Not with any announcement. The station does not signal the end of a shift with bells or lights. It simply arrives, the way the end of things arrives when you have been patient enough to wait for them, quietly, without fanfare, in the space between one moment and the next. The work is done, the data is logged, the line is raised and the reel is locked and the log is closed. You dim the monitors to their lowest setting, a single touch on the panel, and the amber glow softens further, settling into something just above total darkness, enough to navigate by, but no more. The survey room becomes a place of warm shadows, the curved walls barely visible, the porthole a dark circle in the dark. The geological hum is the same as it has always been, and in the dimmer light it seems slightly more present, more filling, the way a sound seems louder when the visual world has been reduced. You stand at the center of the room for a moment, not doing anything, just standing, feeling the floor through the soles of your feet, the hum through the floor, the mineral air in your lungs. You are very far below everything. You are very still, and the deep is very patient around you, pressing its enormous, gentle weight against the curved walls of the station, holding you here in its dark and its quiet as though you are something worth holding. You move to the bunk behind the folding curtain. The curtain is soft, a heavy, close-woven fabric that blocks the amber standby light from the corridor, that muffles the small sounds of the station systems, that creates within the sleeping space a darkness and a quiet that is even deeper than the survey room's dimmed state. You pull it closed behind you. The darkness here is complete. The geological hum is present but softer through the fabric, filtered into something even lower and more foundational, less a sound now than a feeling, a vibration in the mattress, in the pillow, in the air itself. You lie down. The bunk is narrow but sufficient, the mattress firm in the way of things designed for long use in small spaces, the blanket heavy enough to feel substantial without being constricting. You pull the blanket up over your shoulders, you turn your head on the pillow, and the pillow is cool on one side, the side you have not been lying on, and that coolness against your cheek is immediately, deeply comfortable. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyes and the darkness of the room are the same darkness. There is no difference between the inside and the outside of your closed eyelids, just dark and the hum and the slow sigh of the pressure valves somewhere beyond the curtain, and the faint, barely perceptible ping of the hydrophone receiver, still listening, still patient, catching whatever the deep sends up toward it, geological murmur, distant biology, the long, slow calls of creatures moving through the upper water. Your body is heavy, not unpleasantly heavy, the heavy of something that has done its work and is now ready to rest, the heavy of muscles that have been used and are grateful to be still. Your hands, which held the silk line for so long tonight, are relaxed now, fingers curled loosely against the blanket. Your arms are loose. Your shoulders have dropped away from where they might have been holding. You did not notice them holding, but you notice them releasing now, a gradual softening, a small descent toward the mattress. Your breathing is slow. slow and even and deep, the way it has been since you settled in here, since the blanket came up and the pillow received your head and the darkness closed around you. In and out, in and out. The breath moves through you the way the silk line moved through the water, unhurried, steady, finding its own pace. Somewhere below the station, the floor of Sector Orvaine glows. You do not need to see it now. You know it is there. The number is in the log, 3,741 meters, and the organisms are where they have always been, in their patient carpet of cold blue-green light, and the canyon walls rise on either side in the dark, and the water column above them holds its gradients, its layers, its traces of biological life drifting in the deep. All of it continuing without your attention, without your watching. The deep does not need to be watched to be real, and you do not need to watch it anymore tonight. The geological hum moves through the mattress, through the pillow, through the slow rise and fall of your chest. It is the sound of the planet breathing, patient and enormous, and it has been making this sound for longer than there have been ears to hear it, and you are here, inside it, resting inside the breathing of the earth, held in the dark by miles of water above you and solid rock below you and the curved steel of the station around you. Safe, still, deep. Your thoughts, if you are having thoughts, are slow now. They have lost their edges, the way objects lose their edges in low light. They are not sharp enough to catch on. They drift past like the microorganism ribbons drifting past the porthole, blue-green and slow and moving in a direction you could not name, and you watch them drift without reaching for them, without following them. They go where they go. You stay here in the bunk, in the dark, in the hum. The pressure valves sigh. The hydrophone pings, very faint, very far away. The blanket is warm. The pillow is cool. Your hands are still. Your breathing is slow and even and deep. The amber standby light is somewhere beyond the curtain, too far and too dim to reach you here. The log is closed on the desk, the stylus in its groove, the cup beside it, empty and clean. The reel is locked. The sensors are green. The line is raised. The work is done. Everything that needed to be recorded has been recorded. Everything that needed to be measured has been measured. The blank on the chart has its number. And you can rest now. You can let the hum carry you. You can let the dark hold you. You can let the deep, with its patience, with its enormous, unhurried quiet, let it do what it has always done, hold still and breathe and glow somewhere far below, the light, quiet and steady and always there.